Take a look at this map and chart by Aljazerra, published just days after the last U.S. troops left Afghanistan. It shows where and how many U.S. troops are in each country. But there's a country missing on the chart that should be right about here. This isn't unique. It's missing from this 2017 map by Business Insider as well, and many other published maps and charts. If you look at the United States Military Deployments Wikipedia page, it's not listed either, though this may be because it didn't list countries in which the U.S. military are engaged in active combat operations. I'll admit, I'm cherry-picking a little here, but this country missing is still strangely common. The public knows little about the U.S. presence in this country, even with the U.S. military being pretty open about their presence there. But before I tell you what country this is, first, I want to share with you today's sponsor. A while back, I made a video on how to create your own country. Well, you can forget everything I said, because it just got a lot easier. With Politics and War, an online political strategy game where you can create your own country and compete with thousands of other players, diplomatically, militarily, and economically. Politics and War is free to play with limited microtransactions to ensure that the game is fair and not pay to win. Play for free in your browser at politicsandwar.com or download the Politics and War app on the App Store or Google Play Store. Now back to today's topic. The country I'm talking about is the Republic of Djibouti. Located in the Horn of Africa, between 3,000 to 4,000 U.S. troops are operating out of a base here, named Camp Lemonnier. This isn't exactly new. Almost immediately following the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. began leasing Camp Lemonnier, a former French Foreign Legion base, on the outskirts of Djibouti City, Djibouti's capital and most populated city. The U.S. has been conducting operations out of the base ever since, and it isn't going anywhere. Since being established in 2002, the base has continued to expand and improve its facilities. Take a look at this satellite imagery. The United States has even entertained the idea of creating permanent structures and allowing families to accompany soldiers, signaling that the U.S. has no plans to leave Djibouti. Camp Lemonnier became so heavily trafficked at one point that in 2013, Chebelet Airfield, which is leased by the French but had barely been used, took over most of Camp Lemonnier's drone operations. The operations have been based there ever since. And this isn't France's only base. And Djibouti isn't just home to French and U.S. military. Italy, Japan, and China also have bases in the country, and they are all just a few kilometers or less away from each other. German, Spanish, and UK troops also have a presence on the French and American bases. Saudi Arabia is currently finalizing a deal for a base. India is scouting out a location for one. And Ethiopia, a landlocked country bordering Djibouti, is working to house its navy in Djibouti City. But why? Of all places, why do so many countries want a base in Djibouti? To put simply, geography. Located in the Horn of Africa, the Republic of Djibouti is a small country in both population and size. It's home to just under 1 million people and possesses a land area of around 23,000 square kilometers. Though small, Djibouti's geographic location is what has made this country a significant participant on the global stage. Djibouti lies at the southern entrance to the Red Sea, a virtual bridge between Africa and the Middle East, and is adjacent to some of the world's busiest shipping lanes. At the same time, Djibouti is a stable country when compared to many of its neighbors. To the southeast, Somalia's economic and political failures, especially outside of the self-declared state of Somaliland, have bred piracy and terrorism, including an Al-Qaeda affiliate, Al-Shabaab, a group responsible for the killing of at least 500 people in a huge truck bombing in the capital, Mogadishu, in October 2017. But Al-Shabaab sometimes reaches outside of Somalia's borders. In 2015, 148 were killed when Al-Shabaab gunmen stormed a Kenyan university. Another large attack occurred in 2020 on a joint U.S.-Kenyan military camp, killing 3 U.S. citizens, including 1 service member. In Uganda, the group was responsible for the bombing of a rugby club and restaurant during the 2010 Football World Cup final between Spain and the Netherlands, killing 74 people watching the match. To the west of Djibouti is South Sudan. Established in 2011, it's the newest country in the world, but has been embroiled in a civil war for most of its existence. To South Sudan's north is Sudan, the country South Sudan broke from after their own civil war. A military coup occurred in Sudan just days before this video was published. Neighboring Ethiopia became violent in 2020 due to conflict between its federal government and Tigrayans after a political party associated with the Tigrayan ethnic group was stripped of its political power. Neighboring Eritrea joined the conflict and has been accused of committing atrocities against the Tigray region's population and Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia that fled Eritrea's oppressive government. Nearly 2 million people in Tigray have been displaced. Sitting just across the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which links the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, is Yemen, also embroiled in their own civil war since 2014, which has allowed al-Qaeda affiliates to thrive in the country. Less than 2,500 kilometers away are two other important gulfs, the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, linked by the Strait of Hormuz. However, some of these countries that now have a home in Djibouti are direct competitors on the global stage. China has strong economic ties to both the US and the EU, but both sides watch each other suspiciously, as China's military strength, economy, and global influence rapidly grow, and with it, fears in the West of a shifting international order. China and Japan have had a long history of rivalry, though it has improved in recent years. China also has a rocky relationship with India. The two nuclear powers have a history of violent border clashes over disputed territory, sometimes with literal sticks and stones. In 2020, one of these clashes resulted in the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers. China did not publicly release how many of its troops were killed, but did state they suffered 43 casualties. Djibouti did take global rivalry into consideration once. Due to the NATO presence already in Djibouti, in 2014, Djibouti barred Russia from creating a base in the country, after it requested to build one. According to the Foreign Minister of Djibouti, Mohammed Ali Yusuf, in 2014, the country's leadership does not want Djibouti to, quote, become the terrain for a proxy war, and that we just felt that the time of having Russian presence in Djibouti was not appropriate because of what was going on in Syria and Ukraine and other places. We felt that conflicting interests could really rise up here in Djibouti, and we said, okay, we don't want to have two superpowers in this country that could be face-to-face in a conflicting situation. But just 2 years later, Djibouti took their chances with China. U.S. government officials say they were blindsided by Djibouti's approval of China's first overseas military base. China's state news agency stated that the base will ensure China's performance of missions such as escorting, peacekeeping, and humanitarian aid in Africa and West Asia. The base will also be conducive to overseas tasks, including military cooperation, joint exercises, evacuating and protecting overseas Chinese and emergency rescue, as well as jointly maintaining security and international strategic seaways. The People's Liberation Army daily newspaper said in a front-page commentary that the facility was a landmark that would increase China's ability to ensure global peace, especially because it had so many UN peacekeepers in Africa and was so involved in anti-piracy patrols. But China's competitors are concerned that the base's true and sole purpose is to expand its influence and power across the region. The concerns were addressed in the state-run Global Times. The paper stated, "Certainly, this is the People's Liberation Army's first overseas base, and we will base troops there. It's not a commercial resupply point. It makes sense that there is attention on this from foreign public opinion." The paper went on to state that it's not about seeking to control the world. Both the US and China are concerned with economic growth in the region. The US wishes to grow the economy in the Horn of Africa to improve stability and therefore reduce piracy and terrorism. While China is also concerned about piracy, they do not face the same homeland security threats that the US does from terrorist organizations located in the Horn of Africa, though they have been threatened. Instead, they are more focused on developing the region to boost their own economy. Directly adjacent to the naval base is the port of Dhorla, which was originally owned and operated by UAE and Chinese companies until the container facility was seized by the Djiboutian government in 2018. This port is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013, a 21st century version of the Silk Road. One of the berths of the port is reserved for the use of the Chinese Navy. All of the container terminals have direct access to the Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway, which provides landlocked Ethiopia with railroad access to the sea. This railway is another major Chinese investment project. It was financed and constructed by the Chinese. The railway supersedes one built by the French from 1894 to 1917, but the tracks fell into disrepair. By 2004, Ethiopia lost access to the sea, and by 2014, only 213 kilometers of rehabilitated tracks were usable. China is donating large sums of money and providing risky loans to Horn of African countries for projects such as these. But given that China has few allies, some of these gifts may be more for gaining support on the international stage than for economic gain at home. A clearer example of this was a $200 million headquarters for the African Union that was gifted by China. Unsurprisingly, China's Djibouti base has already resulted in conflict between the US and China. In 2018, the US said that China was pointing lasers at their pilots flying overhead. The Pentagon would not provide the exact number of incidents that occurred, but put it between 2 and 10 over a 3-week period. 2 pilots were injured in one incident, and a formal complaint was made to China. China denied the allegations. The United States is not the only ones concerned about the Chinese presence. In 2019, the head of France's Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee, referring to the Chinese presence in Djibouti, stated, "Strategically, we need to strengthen the French presence threefold: economically, culturally, and militarily. It's urgent, otherwise we will lose ground." Djibouti was a French colony until 1977, when it gained independence. The two have had close ties ever since. Currently, the French have around 1,400 soldiers stationed in Djibouti, though some sources claim there are as many as 5,000. Either way, it's the largest force outside of France. Japan has 1,200 troops in Djibouti, and it is Japan's first foreign base since World War II. Like other nations in the country, Japan's Djibouti base is dedicated to curbing piracy, but in 2016, Japan confirmed they were expanding their base. Japanese officials claimed it was to allow for easier rescue of Japanese citizens in Africa, but the timing makes it likely that this was to counter Chinese influence, as this was just months after the construction of the Chinese naval base was announced. India also seeks to counter Chinese influence in the region. If India unsuccessfully acquires a base in Djibouti, as an alternative, it has discussed the possibility with Japan of using their facilities. Italy has made the situation even more awkward. Though Italy is a NATO country, hosts the NATO Defense College, and has over 11,000 U.S. military personnel stationed within its borders, they do not share the same views on China as France and the United States. In 2019, Italy endorsed China's Belt and Road Initiative. And in 2018, China's Global Times reported that China and Italy held a joint medical assistance training event in Djibouti at Italy's base. Italy has historic ties to the region. Eritrea, Ethiopia, and the southern portion of Somalia were all once Italian colonies. The northern part of Somalia was occupied during World War II. The establishment of Italy's Djibouti base came in 2013, coinciding with the launch of the European Union naval force to fight piracy in the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. Saudi Arabia's future base would serve to combat piracy as well, but would also likely be part of its effort to unite Sunni Muslim countries in the greater Middle East to combat Iranian influence in the region. All of these world powers have influenced landlocked Ethiopia to house their navy in Djibouti. With 95% of all of Ethiopia's exports and imports now going through Djibouti ports thanks to the finished railway, Ethiopia is concerned that Djibouti is controlled by foreign naval forces, which could interfere with Ethiopia's trade. The head of the state-owned Ethiopian Shipping and Logistics Services Enterprise stated, "We are afraid perhaps in the future that even Djibouti may not have its own say to really decide on its own fate. This is quite a threat to Ethiopia." But one major reason all of these countries have a presence in the country is power projection. There is no official definition for power projection, but for this video, I'll use the definition from a 1990 paper by a U.S. Air Force major. The paper states, "Power projection is defined as the finite application of military power by national command authority to achieve discrete political ends outside of the borders of the United States, its territories, and possessions." Power projection contingencies are characterized as wars and operations short of war, but not conflicts that are global or total in nature. Future contingencies that demand a U.S. response may occur without warning, be time-sensitive, and require short-duration deployments. U.S. forces may not have immediate access to or a previously established presence in potential theaters of operation. This definition can of course apply to countries other than the US. Some have criticized Djibouti for playing multiple sides, simply for the money. Together, these countries pay a total rent of at least $150 million, nearly 5% of Djibouti's total GDP. And Djibouti has taken money from other countries for other purposes than just bases. Djibouti's National Assembly building, completed in November of 2014, was built and partially financed by the government of Iran, an adversary to both the US and Saudi Arabia. Iran's parliament speaker attended the building's inauguration, and Turkey paid for and constructed Djibouti's largest mosque, which was completed in 2019. Djibouti has decided that this is in their best interest. Djibouti is a poor country. It has a GDP per capita of less than $3,000. A large reason for this is that it has little mineral resources to export, and less than 0.1% of its land is arable. Its geographic location is really its only asset. Djibouti's decision to act as a door to the Horn of Africa for so many nations has certainly paid off in the short term, but will it continue to pay dividends? A major conflict between these global powers could turn Djibouti into a devastated conflict zone. Only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more geography videos. Thank you for watching.